Donut Bag is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Your data is your business. Protect it with ExpressVPN. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to the link listed in my Twitter profile. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Donut Bag. This episode, I welcome back Steelers beat reporter Joe Rutter from TribLive.com, and we're talking about the latest on the Steelers. Not too much going on. A little bit of news. They had OTAs last week and this week, and Ben Roethlisberger spoke to the media for the first time since the season ended. So he said some interesting things. So always good to talk to Joe about the Steelers. And we also talk about the DVE Memorial Day 500, which is a countdown of the 500 best classic rock songs. And it's interesting. I don't know how they come up with this list. I don't know if there's a selection committee or what they do, but it's very interesting. So it's just fun to discuss something, even though it's a completely meaningless list. But hey, there's a lot of meaningless things going on in the world. So speaking of 500, this is episode 483. I'm approaching 500 episodes, and I'm also approaching 3 years doing this podcast. So you think I'm going to do something special? No. Maybe. We'll see. I don't know. I can't think of anything special besides having like special people on, but I don't know. That sounds like a lot of work. Anyway, here is my talk about the Steelers and classic rock with Joe Rutter. Donut Bag starts right now. Ben Roethlisberger making news today, talking first time to the media during OTAs. With me to talk about it is Joe Rutter from TribLive.com. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. I hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend.
It was very nice. Thank you. Yeah, very surprising. We usually from Ben, you don't get much news, or he kind of learned his lesson that he stopped making crazy statements and stuff a couple of years ago. But he talked about first he said that the pay cut was his idea. Do you think that's totally true, or do you think that there's only partial truth in that?
I think it was a mutual understanding, an idea. I mean, the Steelers are going to never come out and say, no, it was our idea.
Right.
But, I mean, the seeds had been planted in January by Art Rooney, and, I mean, they had talked to Ben right after the season. Ben said he wanted to come back. I'm sure he mentioned, hey, I'll do whatever it takes. When I don't think he gave him explicit numbers. I'm sure they worked it out for him. But yeah, I mean, if that's the story he wants to sell, then that's fine. It's harmless, really. Does it really matter in the end? They save $15 million off the salary cap. If he wants to take credit for it, so be it. That's fine. It's not that big of a thing.
Yeah.
But, it is newsworthy because he hasn't spoken since really the playoff game against Cleveland. So it was his first time to, kind of get caught up with him and talk about the team and his salary and the stage of his career because, he's 39 now going into his 18th season.
Another newsworthy thing is he kind of didn't say this was his last year. So is there what percentage of a chance do you think that he'll be back next year?
Well, I think a lot of that depends on how he does this year. I guess there's a chance. I think the Steelers have set this up as if this is one last chance for Ben at 39 years old to try to chase something here, and that the signing of Mason Rudolph gives to an extra year gives them a starter in waiting for 2022. Hey, maybe he comes out and has a good year. Maybe his arm bounces back, second year post-surgery. Maybe this new offensive system takes hold and, he cuts his interceptions down, doesn't fade at the end. Who knows? Possibly, he could be. But I think the Steelers are prepared for this to be his last year unless he totally goes out and wows them.
Another very interesting thing, which completely surprised me, was when he said basically that he wore down at the end. And
you would never. I mean, that to me that's huge. That's that's admitting that.
Yeah.
It was partially his fault. What do you think contributed to him like being worn down at the end?
Well, so, you have a 16-game season, played through a pandemic where things are kind of on edge to begin with. They had start and stops to games, being scheduled, games being interrupted. They had their bye week moved so far up earlier in the season that probably hurt a little bit for him. And he threw a ton of passes. I think he threw over 600 passes. I think he was maybe third most passes in the NFL last year. And I think it finally caught up with him late in the year. Now he's throwing these 2.2 second 3-yard outs and stuff. But I think he just finally with everything, especially coming off the arm surgery, I think that's why he wore down. And it is surprising for him to admit it. All you have to do is look at the numbers to see that he wore down. His numbers dropped off after about the 10-11 game mark.
For me, it was the exact opposite of why he didn't do well. I figured he wore down because his off season was so different coming off of the surgery, and that he wouldn't be able to throw much. But it sounds like he actually threw too much to try to get his arm back. So very interesting. But then, how is this off season compared to previous off seasons? Did he say that it was basically back to normal?
Yeah, I asked him that actually, and compared last year to this year, and he admitted, he threw more than he normally did last year because he was on the throwing program, trying to build his arm back up to play a full season. Now this year he's kind of back to the way he was before that, where he took time off. He threw a little bit, I guess, with the trainer, maybe a little bit in the off season, but it sounded to me like until he got to OTAs, he really hadn't done much of anything the last 3 months, and that's I think has tended to be the course for him. And I'd be surprised if he doesn't do much throw in between now and late July when they go to training camp. I think he's back on that regimen now. The thing that'll be interesting is to see once they get into the season, does he still take Wednesdays off? Especially if he's still trying to learn this offense, is he going to be able to do that?
Yeah, that's a thing. I question why he would show up to these OTAs, but I think maybe one of the big reasons he showed up was because of this new offense. I know he talked about it a little bit, but how much is this offense going to be different under Matt Canada?
And he said it's going to be very different. He said the terminology's changed. He's got to learn that after pretty much, you figure going back to, I guess, when Todd Haley came in, Randy Fichtner was under him, then, took over. So you're looking at, 8 years or so, at least, of pretty much being in the same system. Now he's got to, he's kind of got to start over again and learn some different things. And, I think Matt Canada is going to adapt it to Ben's strengths. And I don't think you're going to expect Ben to be rolling out and doing all these crazy, helping out with the motion plays and stuff that they got going on. But, so I think it's going to change in that regard. But it's just, it's like anything else. He's going to take time and have to learn it and study it. And I think that's why he's here, not as much for the physical work, but is to, kind of, take in what the playbook is and, working with other players on making sure they're all understanding it together.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this all works out. Because, Ben's an old dog, and it's going to be interesting to see how many new tricks you could teach this old dog. And he said something like, I don't mind being under center or something like that. It's like, really? Because you hardly ever do it. You're almost always out of the shotgun. So we'll see.
Yeah, they presented to him when they sat down with him after the season what they wanted this offense to look like, what kind of team they wanted to be. I think less passing, more running. Maybe look more traditional, throw different looks at him. Out of the traditional under center. And, it was basically a matter of whether he would buy in or not. And the fact he's back suggests he did. And if he doesn't adapt, then, I don't know if they jump to Mason Rudolph right away, but, it's going to be on Ben to go along with the program here.
Yeah. Another person, I didn't hear him talk about Mason Rudolph too much, but he talked a lot about Dwayne Haskins, which surprised me. Are they going to be practicing near the car wash and trying to get the ball wet or whatever? That was an interesting quote.
Yeah, he raved about Dwayne Haskins' mechanics and said if he could, I guess if he threw the football through a car wash, the ball wouldn't get wet. But he wasn't asked about Mason Rudolph. He wasn't asked about Josh Dobbs. Those guys have been around. A reporter asked him about Haskins because Haskins is new, former number one pick, and I was surprised he gave such a glowing response about him. And maybe that's his way of making Dwayne Haskins feel welcomed and being a part of this team. We'll have to see. I don't think it was a slight on any of the other quarterbacks, although he rarely has ever gushed about his other teammates, other quarterbacks on the roster. But yeah, so it was interesting. But I think it was probably for Dwayne Haskins' benefit more than anybody else's.
If Haskins even makes a team, I think that's a major success for the Steelers because I mean that was such a no risk acquisition. A former first round pick, and you have a guy that could even if he's a backup, that's still valuable.
Oh yeah, I mean he's a guy that was being a first round pedigree and all the talent he had. If you can put it together, you've got a player now that you've got on your roster for a couple of years, and you can really see what you can got with this guy. And maybe you're not looking automatically for a quarterback in the draft next year. So it'll be something to see worth playing out over the preseason. And thankfully this year they will have preseason games, 4 of them, to be able to make those type of decisions. Unlike last year when they just pretty much had to guess based on practices and camp.
Have they said yet whether training camp is going to be and Latrobe is going to be back to quote unquote normal, or do we know yet? I don't think I've heard anything yet.
They have not made that official yet. I would think with everything else kind of opening up and especially with outdoor activities, it seems like I think the Pirates maybe is it July? They're going full capacity again.
I think so.
I think if those things are allowed to happen, they're going to have fans out there. Now, I don't know how they're going to, keep them, it's almost like the, keep them apart. It's almost like the PGA Championship when they were chasing Phil Mickelson down the fairway.
Yeah.
How are you going to tell all these fans assembled on the hillside and standing around the perimeter at St. Vincent that, you have to socially distance? And what are you going to have, every 6-foot barriers? So I think, it's, with the way everything else is opening up, I think the Steelers are going to be able to, try to make it as business as usual as possible with training camp. Maybe they do try to limit the number of fans at least early, but I think if everything else is opening back up, why can't training camp?
Yeah, that's. Oh man, I miss it so much. I'm sure, and I'm sure you media people also miss. Maybe you actually get to talk to the players now.
We might get to talk to the players, but I don't expect that we will be actually having dorm accommodations like we do in the past because they have to open more spaces up for players. I guess they don't double up or they can't double up maybe because of the virus. They used to make the younger players double up, so they might be, and maybe there's rooms they can or cannot use because of COVID. But from what I understand, the media will all be commuting this year unless something changes.
No. Would that be a long commute for you?
It would be a good hour.
Oh no. Get it.
I mean, it's doable. And then from what I understand, I mean, things can change. We've got like 6 weeks till this happens, but it looks like Zoom's going to be the way to go. It's you might not be still getting one-on-one interviews out on the field afterward. Unless things change, unless they, put a rope up and keep the players 6 feet away from us, I mean, there's ways it can be done, but whether the NFL wants to do that right now, I think that remains to be seen.
It's interesting how that's all going to work out because I hope somebody's speaking for the media people, and it's not a permanent thing. It's they don't decide. You know what? These Zoom calls are just fine. You don't have to actually talk to us. So
well, and it's not just. I mean, it's not for me because I'm in the media. I think fans would want that because right now we're all getting the same player. You're getting all the same stories coming out of this. If fans want different perspective stories on different athletes, you can only get that usually with a one-on-one atmosphere. Being able to pick and choose who you want to interview instead of being given, a player on a Zoom call by the team. It helps, it just makes for more stories, better stories, more access for the fans to have to these players if you're allowed to just, get players as you see fit, as was the case in the past.
Yeah. I'd have to think the Steelers have one of the biggest, I don't want to say the biggest number of members of the media, but it's, with as popular as the Steelers are, I can't imagine that it's this crazy in, say, like Cincinnati or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. I mean, I think because of the interest, there's a lot more outlets out there, trying to get involved, and it's I don't think the Bengals are worried about what the fans are going to be getting coming from their training camp, whether they're going to get 2 players or 4 players or whatever. Where with Steelers, fans want as much, they crave as much and seek as much as they possibly can.
How long are the OTAs? Is it just last week and this week?
It's 2 more days this week, Wednesday, Thursday. Then it's set up for 4 days next week.
Oh.
Then they go into the 3-day mini camp the week after that. Now, the thing is, though, historically on the week they have 4 practices scheduled, Tom on that Monday gives them the day off and either takes them to the movies or Dave and Buster's or wherever. He's always had some kind of activity lined up, kind of a team bonding session. Now with the pandemic, I don't know if they could pull that off and do that again this year, but I would be surprised if they're actually out on the field all 4 days next week.
How many is this required for all the veterans? I mean, I know a few more came in today, but is it still like a volunteer thing?
Yeah, it's all voluntary. Nothing is required. And the interesting thing about last week was going into this, you didn't know who was going to show up because the Steelers through the union came out and said they didn't want to have to participate in these. They wanted them to be voluntary. They wanted to be like last year. And it took some negotiating with ownership to, set the guidelines for this, to make it limited on-field work and make it more for the rookies and the younger players because of the fact that the Steelers have a 17-game season like everybody else. And they got one more preseason game than most teams. So, I think, they saw the benefits of it for the younger players, but also wanted to make sure that the veterans didn't come in. And really, only a handful of starters were in for the entire week last week. You saw a few more trickle in. Juju and Chase Claypool came in, a couple others. And you might have some more trickle in later this week, early next week. But really, the only thing that's mandatory is that mini camp in 2 weeks.
Another player Ben mentioned was Naji Harris. It sounds like so far Naji is doing everything right. Ben talked about him being a hard worker. So far, is everything looking good with Naji?
Yeah, he has. I mean, it's football in shorts. They're really not blocking anybody. He's really not running behind his starting offensive lineman. Nobody's tried to tackle him yet. So it's unknown, but yeah, he's in great shape. He looks good. He looks tall and lean, and he doesn't look like a 230-pound running back. He looks smaller than that. He looks fast. And he has long arms. He looks like he'd be really good out of the backfield catching passes. It looks great, but until you see him at least going head-to-head against the first-team defense or a preseason game, you're really not going to know too much.
Yeah, he does kind of look small. I noticed that. It's like, but yeah, maybe in pads and he'll look much better. So.
Yeah, not small in a bad way. Just he looks light, not small, maybe but lighter. He looks lighter than that. He's tall. Maybe that's makes him spread the weight over more. But he's just a tall, lean athlete, and you can tell he works out a lot. I mean, he's in great shape. It's just he doesn't look like when you think of a 230-pound running back, and you're thinking maybe of a 5'9" guy that's a little chunky. This isn't him at all. He's tall, lean, and carries it well.
So excited! I hope he stays healthy. I think it's going to be a huge addition to the offense. So we will see. All right, so Also, this past weekend, DVE had the Memorial Day 500. This is, I believe, the second year that well, they brought it back. They used to have it a long time ago, but this is the second year. Last
Well,
year,
it's actually the third year.
really? Oh, they did it in 2019 also. Okay,
Yeah, they did it. They brought it back in 19, and last year they had it because of the pandemic, and they decided to keep going with it,
Okay.
which I hope they do. It's a fun.
Oh, it's fun. It's fun. It generates a lot of talk online, which is fun. Whenever I'm listening, just randomly, and they play some song and they say, "Oh, this was song number 173." It's like, what are you talking about? That should be a lot higher. So it's just fun to talk about. But it seems to be an upset. Back in Black by AC/DC was the number one song. It was number 10 last year. Do you agree that Back in Black should be number one?
I'm glad that AC/DC got a number one song in there. You could make a case for Hell's Bells or You Shook Me All Night Long or a couple other ones they've had. But I just was glad to see that Stairway to Heaven wasn't number one again. And that, I mean, my main gripe is, yeah, these songs are all about 40 years old. And, does it really matter what's 1, 2, 3, whatever? But it interrupted the steady pace of Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, The Who, Rolling Stones. I just wanted to see a little diversity in there. A little different sound. And I was happy to hear that AC/DC got there with Back in Black.
See, that's the thing. I know rock is, I don't want to say it's dead, but you don't really hear too many new rock songs. But still, yeah, gosh, I'm tired of Leonard Skinner and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. Like, my goodness, we've heard this all our lives. Let's get something at least a little bit different. Looking at...
The thing is, okay, say 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when we're talking classic rock, is it still going to be songs from the 70s again, in the 60s, and, a little bit to the 80s? Or is there classic rock that's actually going to be like in the 2000s? I don't know. It just seems like you hit this wall with what is considered a classic rock song, and you haven't had much, like you said, is rock dead? There's not much really filling the gap in since then. And I think, that's you're going to be regurgitating the same list of 500 songs in different ways unless they change it up a little bit here.
It's a little bit scary. And not only do you have to wonder, okay, the rock songs might not be changing, but the people listening to them might be changing because, it's probably older people that listen to it. And... older people don't stick around much longer, so it's going to be an interesting issue.
Is it going to be is classic rock for us as we begin to fade away? Is it going to be like, I don't know, Glenn Miller in the 1940s? When that was the sound,
right?
All of a sudden disappears. Is classic rock going to go the way of the big band era or something? It'd be neat to see how that unfolds. But yeah, you'd like to think you'd get some, I guess if it's newer, it's not classic, but you would like to think that they was able to, pull in some different sounds, different voices, but I guess that doesn't fit, when you're a classic rock station like DVE, you're kind of pigeonholed into what certain songs and styles of music you can play.
I'll always remember, I think it was in like the late 90s, they started playing 80s music as like classics, as like oldies. I'm like, oh boy. But now you could say the same thing. Like the other station, Star 100.7, they were playing everything from like the early 2000s. And that's almost now considered like not oldies or classics, but it's kind of like nostalgia stuff. So it's a little crazy.
Yeah, when you look at, if you're talking about going back to the 2000s and you listen, and, you listen to songs from the 80s, it's the equivalent now of listening back to the songs in the 2000s, really. Every era has its different sound. And I'm still a huge 80s guy, but I'm sure there's going to be people, as they get older, are going to be, pining for that 2000s type of music.
Okay, so I'm looking at this list, and everything is quote unquote old. You have Back in Black was 1, Stairway to Heaven was 2, Sweet Home Alabama 3, We Will Rock You by Queen 4, Sympathy for the Devils of Rolling Stones, another AC/DC song, You Shook Me All Night Long, Free Bird, another Brick in the Wall, Bohemian Rhapsody, Hotel California, Immigrant Song. These are all old songs. I'm going through this, and like the only thing that can be considered sort of not in the 70s is Guns N' Roses. Wow.
Yeah, really. I just pulled the list up here. Derek and the Dominoes. I mean, you're like, you're going back. Yeah, Guns N' Roses, Welcome to Jungle, number 30. It's, you're not, I guess Aerosmith's still playing some, and, the Rolling Stones sort of, but it's, most of these bands are faded away and haven't played for a long time, and especially it's been a decade or so since their heyday. It's just, you don't, other than Guns N' Roses, do you have anybody else from the 90s or beyond that have made any of these lists? And if they did, maybe they're buried way down at the bottom. I see Bon Jovi's in here a little bit, but really it's just you just go through these, and who has really had a hit out in the last 20 plus years? Even Van Halen really hasn't. Here, Hart, Van Halen, Steve Miller, Tom Petty. You don't have any songs from this millennium, really.
The only thing that can be considered sort of new is the stuff by like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden, and Green Day and stuff. That's it.
Yeah, and I don't see any of that on this list as I'm going through here, unless I'm missing it.
They're there, but it's pretty deep on the list. So,
And this is personal for me. My biggest gripe. Huge Def Leppard fan. My favorite band growing up. Pour Some Sugar on Me. 181 is their highest hit. You're telling me they don't have a song that can be? They're Rock and Roll Hall of Famers last year inducted. They can't have a song in the top 100. To me, that's blasphemous.
Pour Some Sugar on Me is 181, and that is the highest ranked Def Leppard song. You're right. That is an outrage. I love Def Leppard.
Then you have a slew of them. Photograph 211, Rock of Ages 230, Bring On the Heartbreak 241. So they have representation in the middle, but they just don't climb any higher than that. I mean, the Clarks have a song in here. Yeah, maybe move some, get some Clark stuff up there. They're a local band. Get more Donnie in there.
Yeah, there's a couple Donnie songs. So interesting. We'll see what happens next year with this. This is I want to know who this committee is. Who is this committee that is coming up with this? This is so silly.
Yeah, and I guess you can vote or call. I don't know if you can do online voting. Maybe they take some of that into consideration. But it just seems like, each segment of this countdown has certain bands in it until you get to the top. Once loaded up with 7 or 8 bands, and all of the songs all the songs you heard them playing 25, 30 years ago are still the songs making this list now.
You know what? And they're trying, though. Every time I listen to DVE, they're like, here's a new song by blah, blah, blah. That's when I know it's like, okay, time to change the channel. I'm not even interested in this. So they're trying, but it's like nobody wants to hear new stuff.
Exactly. It doesn't fit their format, so I guess why should we complain if there's nothing new in there when they've made their living off these, this same genre of songs all these years. But it made for a fun weekend listening and trying to figure out, what songs would be up there, and it's good to have on while you're outside cooking on the grill or sitting around the fire pit. So it makes for interesting fodder.
You know what? Like when it was when they were playing like the last 15, 20 songs, I was very invested. It's like I'm not changing the channel. I want to hear what they have. So it's it's very good idea by them to do something like this. So it's
and they dragged the thing out till after 8:00 too, which was impressive.
That's right.
I thought they'd be done about 5 or 6, and I was surprised that it was so far back in the countdown.
Yeah. All right, sir. Hey, thanks so much.
Sure, anytime, Joe.
Hey, I'll see you. Bye.